The Vine neighborhood is bounded on the north by Lovell Street, on the west by Oakland Drive, on the south by Howard Street and Crosstown Parkway, and on the east by Burdick Street. So literally some of the real downtown, like the State Theater, is sort of officially in the Vine neighborhood, but it's more of the downtown. It's got a very long history because it was one of the earliest directions that people expanded once they started settling in Kalamazoo. They couldn't expand towards the river because the river was there and there was not a bridge over it for many years. They expanded to the north somewhat, and then they expanded to the south to the Vine neighborhood. Now, they went to the north, but since then a lot of those buildings, those original buildings, are gone, but we still have a lot of our oldest buildings in Vine because they're just still there, they've survived. So we can say, while it's not the oldest neighborhood in the city, it's one of the most intact old neighborhoods in the city. I love the fact that in the past all these little stores were located throughout the neighborhood. They were scattered around everywhere, so you didn't have to go more than 2 or 3 blocks to find a store where you could buy, maybe some fresh produce or a can of beans or some sugar or salt or flour or whatever you needed. And they were all within a short walk, and that was because everybody walked everywhere. What's my favorite part of Vine? I have 2 areas that I really, really like. I like Axtell Street because it's short and has a little bit of everything on it. It has a couple of very early houses, including the Axtell Farm, and then it has, some more fancy upscale houses on it. I like Park Street because it's the story that it tells. It has one of the earliest houses, the Dexter Walker House, which has just been restored at Park and Dutton. It has not really quite mansions, but I'd say the more upscale homes are running along there, along with probably one of the earliest duplexes in the city down there on Park Street. I want to find out more about them, but they're fascinating. They're all fascinating to me. It does not, nowadays it's a month. It used to be a week that goes by where I don't find something new that I hadn't noticed before on a house that I've been looking at for 50 years. Well, welcome everybody. I'm really glad. This is great. This is a wonderful turnout. I want to put a plug in for the Kalamazoo kettle corn over there. Please eat it all. Chris doesn't want to take it home. It's really yummy. I have lived in Vine since July 1st, 1959. Okay, 1959, except for 10 years when I moved out of state. So we're going to have a party this summer to celebrate the fact that our family has been there a long time. And so Vine neighborhood has always been one of my points of interest in history. I remember walking back and forth to the Vine Elementary School and noticing stained glass windows and marks in the concrete and wondering what all these were and who were the people that made them. Why were there marks in the concrete? I mean, I understood why there were street names, but what did these other marks mean, that kind of thing. And it was one of the things, the Vine neighborhood is one of the things that really revved up my interest in history, as opposed to mathematics. So it was really fun when I was talking to Beth and she was thinking about doing another neighborhood series, and I thought, well, I'd love to do the history of Vine. And this has gotten me going because once I started actually putting together what I had, I realized how much I have, and that this is only a scratching of the surface of what I have in terms of material. What I tried to put together tonight is visual images, because if you want to read a book about Vine, that may be a few years down the road. But tonight we'll be seeing a lot of images, some that you may not have ever seen before. There are some that I found that I don't think anybody else has ever seen since someone made the image for the first time maybe a century ago. So I'm hoping that it'll be a lot of fun for you. As we go, the lights get dim up here at the front when the screen comes down. As we go, I would be happy to take a few questions, but don't let me get sidetracked too much, because I could probably do an entire 45 minutes on about 20 different topics in Vine, and then we all wouldn't get out of here till sometime tomorrow, so I don't want to do that. So I'd like to just go ahead and get started. Okay. Wait for the screen to come down. I will not be offended if you get up to go get more kettle corn partway through. That doesn't bother me at all. And I want to thank the library for hosting this for us and for putting together this really spectacular little title sheet. This is the poster they're using, and I had to use it for the title for this presentation because I really love it. So the Vine neighborhood is people. obviously. We have people that are doing things correctly with their cars. Well, maybe not. I don't think the 4-year-old should be driving. And obviously, whoever was driving the car there, and that picture was taken in the mid-1940s, made some kind of mistake on Vine Street, and it was recorded in a photo. There were hardworking people like the folks in the celery fields, which we had all around us, down below between Crosstown and the Forum building, that pond area down there. That was celery fields quite a while ago. That's why the Michigan historical marker about celery crowing in Kalamazoo is down in that area. And you have people like the little shops. We used to have little grocery stores, neighborhood grocery stores scattered throughout the neighborhood. About every 4 or 5 blocks there was another little store where you could pick up your perishable goods, or you could pick up a can of beans or sugar or salt or whatever it was you needed. This one was Seth Hyma's grocery store down at my dad's old studio at 1309 South Westnedge. So I'm not going to tell about every single picture in detail, but I really do want to tell you about some of these. And the neighborhood is buildings. Now, it's a lot easier to find pictures of buildings than it is to find pictures of people, because buildings don't move. And, and when you have the 19th century, when people had to hold relatively still to have a photograph taken, it was a lot more likely that you'd find pictures of buildings. And there was also an explosion of photographs starting around 1908 when the Postal Service, oddly enough, was the reason for it, the Postal Service changed its rules on what a postcard was. Previous to that, a postcard was a photo or a drawing or something on one side, and the back side could only be used for the address and the stamp, which is why on some old postcards you'll find writing around the edge of the picture or all sorts of little things. People would come to town, they'd buy a postcard, and they'd come in on the train and they'd drop it off right there at the train station saying, I got here okay. Today we just whip out our cell phones, but that's what they would do then. And so that's why postcards are in such big circulation, but that changed in the early 1900s where you could have what's called a divided back. So part of the back could be for the address and the other part was for the message. And so there was this explosion in postcards in that time period. So when you see, as I'm going through my collections, I realized that I know there were postcards, but there's just this huge explosion after about 1908, and that's the reason why. So these are all buildings that are in Vine. I've got it here. Where it is. Oh, there we go. This is a church that's gone now, but it's on the site of the KPEP building down on Park Street between Cedar and Walnut. This is the Vine Elementary School, the first one. This is, now how many know this? Well, this Kiefer's Pharmacy, it was Kiefer's, it was Fisher's, it was the pharmacy. It was the place where if you were involved in the civic or theater in Kalamazoo, that was where you went to buy your grease paint. That was the one place in town that carried a lot of the theatrical makeup. This house, you'll see the other one later, this house is still there. It's just you'd have a really hard time recognizing it today. So this is the Vine neighborhood in 1860. Vine is bounded by Burdick Street, Oakland Drive, Lovell, and then on the south side, Howard and Crosstown. So, and this is what was there in 1860. You can see that the here we go. This is Vine Street, but once it crosses Westnedge, it's called Rice Street. There are 2 Oak Streets here and here. And some of this, and this of course was West Street, although, no, this was College Street, excuse me. That little bit of a divot that Westnedge takes when it hits Lovell and right there at the Bethel Baptist Church, it was West Street up to that street, and then beyond that it was College Street, because at this point in time, Kalamazoo College was located about here with one of its very first buildings. Okay? So that's why it was called College Street. And the original boundaries of Kalamazoo were, according to Titus Bronson, he was a very inventive, imaginative man, North Street, West Street, now Westnedge, South Street, and the river. Okay? So at this point in time, the Vine neighborhood, most of it was like the nether regions. It was the hinterlands. On this, you see all these little, where you see the lots, but if you see a square, that's where there was a house. So while there may be a lot of lots already lined out here, the number of houses is still relatively slim. The Union School served the entire city, and I will have a picture of that later. This was the agricultural fairgrounds, all more importantly, the racetrack. Because this was back in the day of horses. So we didn't, you didn't drive your Mustang down Main Street at 70 miles an hour. You rode your Mustang at the agricultural fairgrounds, or you raced on your horses.